Well guys, Space Marine 2 is an incredibly based game and a huge success, and was able to reach the highest concurrent player count for any 40k title ever. The Alpha Chad himself, Henry Cavill, is playing the game and talking about how good it is while using a Warhammer lore book as his mousepad. He also apparently told Amazon to get bent when they asked him if he would make a woke Warhammer show. Get mad. But it keeps getting better. It turns out the CEO who made the game is something of a Chad himself, and he said Space Marine 2 is meant to be a throwback game to a golden era when games weren't imposing their morals on gamers. And this little comment right here absolutely sent the gay liberal cucks of Reddit into a tizzy. They got so mad they're not sure which gender they are anymore. We're the ones who are supposed to tell people what their morality should be, they all cried into the air as they shook their tiny fists. Rock Paper Cuck Gun said, Saber won't say whether their CEO wrote this highly baity comment about games imposing morals on gamers. These people are such degenerates that saying games shouldn't impose their morals on people is somehow considered a controversial comment now. Speaking of men whose wives drive them to work in a Prius, y'all might have noticed that a bunch of gay Redditors are lurking in my comment section recently and calling me a grifter and a shill. These are of course lies, and I exposed them in a video linked in the description below if you care. But guys, are y'all surprised? I dunk on these dudes constantly, so of course they're gonna come after me one day. Anyway, enough female drama. Let's talk about Warhammer. So imagine it's 2007 and mom just picked you and the boys up from school on a Friday. On the way home, you pick up Code Red and pizza rolls. One more stop, Blockbuster Video. Halo 3 and Modern Warfare have been rented already, but you decide to try a new game, Space Marine 2. You and the boys hang out until the wee hours of Saturday morning, playing co-op while a Linkin Park CD plays on loop. Guys, this is the only way I know how to explain this game. Yes, it came out in 2024, but it really was made in 2007, if you catch my drift. Despite being made by a relatively small publisher, Saber Interactive, the game has received resounding praise from critics. People are saying things like, Space Marine 2 is a reminder of what we've lost, and the game is so masculine it makes me feel like I've been living in a desert the past few years. Several main characters in the game are white dudes. This would be considered a hate crime by Kotaku and IGN. Space Marine 2 just hits differently. Duty, honor, and purpose are what the main character Titus cares about. He would rather die than fail his men or the Emperor. You're going to drown in blood, violence, and alien guts. Scientists say your balls get bigger from playing this game. You can play the game single player or co-op, and best of all, the game doesn't have a single microtransaction or queer flag in it. I'll talk more about the actual game later, but let's talk a bit more about Saber Interactive. This is the team that made the game. Like, don't you want to get a beer with these dudes? Nobody is a fairy, nobody's a dude wearing a dress, just normal guys. And the masses have spoken. You can keep your DEI trash. We want masculinity back. So I want to get into the specifics of the game a bit more in a minute, but we need to talk about the badass CEO Matthew Karch, who positioned the game as being designed specifically for Giga Chads like us. He said this, "When we signed the deal to make Space Marine 2, all I wanted was a throwback game. We had the chance to work on something which by its nature was, quote, old school." Just going to stop here for a second. Has this dude been watching the AndyPants gaming channel? I mean, y'all know this is all I talk about. All I talk about is masculinity, throwback games, 2007 games, etc. He continues on, "We worked on Halo back in the day, and that game could be distilled down to the simplest of shooting loops, but it was entirely addicting. This is what we wanted to recapture. I hope that games like Space Marine 2 and Wukong are the start of a reversion to a time when games were simply about fun and immersion." Guys, this is controversial somehow. All he said was that games should be fun, and leftist cucks are freaking out. Like, huh? The quote continues on, "I spent some time as chief operating officer at Embracer, and I saw games there that made me want to cry with their overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. We just want to do some glory kills and get the heart rate up a little. For me, that is what games should be about." Dude, I'm sorry, but how could you possibly disagree with this guy? All he's saying is he wants to bring back fun and immersion and thinks political messages and imposing morality doesn't belong in a game. Well, like I said earlier, this absolutely triggered the men who dress in women's clothes. They got so frazzled they couldn't find their tampons anymore. Kat Bailey, who was possibly a dude at some point at IGN, said this, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 dev won't say whether imposing morals on gamers' YouTube comment is from its CEO. The comment on YouTube is from a Matthew Karch account, and he has intimate knowledge of how the game was made. So it's very, very likely this is him. Saber Interactive declined to confirm the comment was from their CEO, but Matthew on his LinkedIn said this: "Whoever wrote that seems pretty sharp." Like, hats off to this man. Broken leftists love to somehow catch you in a trap, and the dude was basically like, nah, you're gay, F off. A different writer who uses tampons at PC Gamer wrote an article with this headline: Space Marine 2 Studio hopes for a reversion to a time before games were imposing morals on players. At the bottom of the article, he says this while fighting back tears. In 2021, Warhammer 40k Company Games Workshop released a statement explaining that the Imperium of Man stands as a cautionary tale of what could happen should the very worst of humanity's lust for power and extreme unyielding xenophobia set in, and explicitly condemning the presence of hate symbols and groups in the Warhammer 40k community. Like, this is all these broken degenerates have at this point. If you want a badass game with a masculine character, you're obviously a Nazi. Or if you don't want DEI and ESG scores pushed by BlackRock, you're obviously a white supremacist. It's like these guys are gobbling down the corporate fascist message, and yet we're Nazis for not gobbling it down with them? Like, huh? I hope this makes homo leftists take a deep look within themselves and ask, why do I need to keep lying about what other people are saying in order to validate myself? Guys, so moving on, I think it's possible that Saber Interactive could be the next truly GigaChad company. It could become a bastion of free speech and the edgy throwback games we've always wanted. Think about it. Activision is cooked and gay. Microsoft is cooked and gay. Sony is cooked and gay. Once you hire a troon, it's very, very hard to get them out of the company. So, of course, these gay devs are going to keep their job at these companies and keep wondering why their games are failing. Saber Interactive seems to have a lot of based, normal people in place, and they're only going to capitalize on the success of this subject matter in games in the future. Saber has a game coming up called John Carpenter's Toxic Commando coming out that looks really cool, and they're also doing this Jurassic Park survival game that could be very good as well. If you look at shots of people who work at Saber, it's just like normal dudes and normal women. So I'm really excited for what Saber Interactive does next. And eventually, in a few years, they could be giving EA and Activision a run for their money with big AAA titles. All right, so finally, I wanted to talk a bit about the game itself. And guys, my apologies here if I butcher the lore, but I'll do my best to describe what I liked about the game. So Space Marine 2 doesn't have the most groundbreaking story ever, but it's a really solid tale of honor, devotion, and duty that a soldier feels towards his people. Titus goes from being accused of heresy and placed on the Death Watch to being reinstated as an esteemed soldier fighting for the Imperium of Man. There's definitely parallels here to the Crusades, and parts of the game feel very Catholic, even though I'm not Catholic myself. The big bad in the game is the, quote, chaos. Chaos Marines are Marines that have given over to their sinful fleshly desires and are basically evil now. Taken over by something similar to like the 7 Deadly Sins. I was looking, chaos bosses are called things like pestilence, hate, things like that. They refer to the chaos guys as heretics and degenerates, and I think there's definitely a parallel here that might be made to people who are atheists and people who just don't believe in anything at all. So I think there's definitely an argument to be made that the good guys in this game are religious and the bad guys are not religious, and that's probably a huge thing that's triggering all these people because, as we know, troons and men who dress in women's clothes don't actually believe in morality. They don't really have morality. That's all I'm going to say about the story because I don't want to ruin it, but there's a lot of double crossing, there's a lot of surprises, and it's actually a really good story. The campaign is maybe 10 hours long. Now, if you thought the gameplay in this game was going to be as simple as Gears of War, you would be wrong. Space Marine 2 elevates itself from older games by adding really satisfying combat, melee weapons, and an awesome class system. The game also has PvP, PvE modes, and of course the campaign as well. The melee system in this game is kind of like a light Dark Souls system, maybe similar to Jedi Fallen Order. Big red and blue lights let you know when to time your parry. Execution kills leave you drowning in blood and are absolutely badass. You'll have knives, swords, chainsaws, and hammers. The guns are very fun, satisfying, and I gotta be honest, despite this game technically I think being a AA game, it feels very, very AAA to me. The game has 6 different classes you can choose from to match your playstyle. They are Tactical, which is more of a generalist, Assault, which means you're running right into the enemy's throat and smashing them with melee weapons and ground smashes, Vanguard, which means you've got a grappling hook to pull enemies close, or rather you're going towards them, Bulwark, in which you are a tank with a huge shield and you draw enemies to yourself, Sniper, obviously engaging from far away, and Heavy. Heavy doesn't have a melee weapon but moves slow and has a huge chain gun that does loads of damage. Space Marine 2 is almost certainly going to get snubbed at Homo Jeff Keighley's Game of the Year awards this year, because this game is quote-unquote controversial now, because apparently pausing momentarily to not chug the satanic corporate propaganda of Microsoft and Sony and Activision is somehow controversial. Got it. That's right, you better be a good little piggy and chug down the corporate slop all the homosexual leftists are pushing on you. Guys, let's be honest, they're pissed that people like you and me are beginning to figure out the truth, and they're rising up. They hate that channels like mine are suddenly becoming popular because those of us who know the truth are spreading it, and it's growing. Dude, look at Dragon Age and Assassin's Creed Shadows. Like, these companies are waking up, and they're starting to realize that we're not cool with the gay communist slop anymore. And they're screwed because Ubisoft just lost a bunch of money. EA just lost a bunch of money. Sony just lost $400 million. Guys, it's getting so bad that they can't afford to not listen to us anymore. And games like they're looking at games like Space Marine 2. They're seeing the rabid fans that Space Marine 2 has. They're seeing how many copies Space Marine 2 sold. And they're like, maybe we shouldn't put gay globalist BlackRock trash in all of our games. So anyway, guys, I'm not going to go off on my conspiracy theory tangent, but really appreciate y'all. Subscribe to the channel. See y'all later. Bye.